Hello, everyone. And as I've often loved to say, hello, world, because people from all over the world listen to these calls, especially on replay. So I'm so delighted you're here with us today. And we've been doing these calls for more than 10 years for
Mm.
Called Love Institute. And it's such a wonderful gift to me. It feeds my soul. And how
Wonderful.
fabulous that is. You know,
Hmm.
if I had to give up food or give up this, I think I would give up food.
Ah,
That's how important it is. And so it's beautiful to have all of you joining us, just incredible. And I am so excited about our guest today. I've known Robert Brumet for many, many years in many different ways. An acquaintance when I was in ministerial school. He was pioneering. I don't know if you were pioneering it or not, Robert. Unity of Overland Park, and you were meeting at a shopping center, I think.
yeah.
And so we've been acquaintances, and he's um, been a meditation teacher. And when he came back to be part of the faculty at Unity Ministerial School, every time I came into Kansas City, if Robert was teaching at night, I always went to his meditation classes because he is a master teacher of meditation. And he was bringing in something that Unity Ministerial School didn't feel into in the same way. Maybe I think they probably knew about it, but they didn't feel into it in the same way
Uh,
that Robert did.
yeah.
And so all of those things, a teacher, he's an author. He's written more books than I have. I've only written one. And how many have you written, Robert?
Well, I'm about to launch my fifth one.
I saw that and I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to be at that launch. And
Wonderful.
um, he is a mentor to a lot of amazing souls, including Victor, who was on one of our calls, who is the lead at Temple Buddhist Center now. And Robert is um, one of the teachers that are regulars at Temple Buddhist Center. And you'll notice I didn't put Reverend in front of his name because he never does these days. And interestingly, I never have either in front of my name. I've used doctor for different reasons as a role model for women, but I've never put Reverend in front of my name. And so it's just an amazing journey that we're on. Most of all, I call Robert now beloved friend, both of them capitalized.
Yeah.
Uh,
Agreed.
it- it's like I see the Christ in you, but rather than the word Christ, which is a bit of a trigger point for some people, I see the beloved in you and it means the same thing. And the beloved doesn't care what you call it.
Right.
It can call it Garth. We can call it Garth or Ross
I
or
like that.
Phil or Marla. It is so precious and so beautiful. So Robert these days uses, I think, a word that I often use, and that is guide. Uh, a guide rather than even a teacher sometimes, although he's still doing beautiful meditation retreats, weekend events, even. So I admire him. And he's only a couple of years younger than me. so, so I another purpose in my being so excited about this call is that I think we're partly recording history. We're recording things that have happened in the four stages of Robert's life. I sometimes mention things that have happened in the four stages of mine. So we're looking at past, and we're in the present. And I think these calls are also for future time because I know most of my mentors have now passed through the veils, died, and I got some videos of some of them, but never video. I mean, I got some audio, but never video. So these are calls for future time as well as present time. And I'm so grateful for Garth and his amazing ability to do these kinds of calls because it's so important. And he has the skill sets of someone who works for humanities team. And as Ross is involved with them too. Thank you, Ross. I'm delighted you're here on the call today. And we simply know that these calls are done. And this is the invocation that I love using, invoking the presence and the power of the Holy Spirit to come upon us, fill us with that power, fill us with that knowing with a capital K knowing. Move in us, move through us. Reveal yourselves in our lives, through our lives, and as our lives. Come, come, Holy Spirit, come upon us. And so it is. So that invocation, or one similar to that, was one that I used on the platform when I was senior minister at Unity of Tustin for over 19 years. And before that, as senior minister of Unity of Walnut Creek. And that was where I realized and learned, I think it was from Janet Manning or Charles Fillmore's great granddaughter, Connie Fillmore, who both came into my lives in significant ways, that invocation was one that Charles Fillmore used a lot. He worded it a little differently. I am now in the presence of pure being, immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge the presence and the power of this spirit. And it goes on. And so we're acknowledging that now and asking that all of the people on this call be filled with that spirit. And all of the people on this call be inspired in the last 30 minutes of the program to speak that heart knowing, those oh my God moments when you can simply say, oh my God, this has happened to me. It's part of my life. It's part of what I recognize as my very essence, as my very being. So precious, so powerful. Come, Holy Spirit. And so, with that welcome and that invocation, let's talk just for a moment about the theme of today's call. And I can do something with Robert Brumet that I can do with almost no one else that I know in the same kind of way. And that is talk about two things happening simultaneously, although there was a 10-year period before he was called to the second one, I think. He'll tell us more. But two things happening simultaneously in his life, and that is the integration of unity and Buddhism as a teaching philosophy and a teaching, what they now call at Temple Buddhist Center, I love this phrase, American Buddhism, which brings in psychology And Robert was one of the founding members of the Temple Buddhist Center, and one of the original organizers before Victor was even there. So um, we're going to be weaving that in, and that's what I want to speak about first, just a little bit. I've never
Okay.
recorded anything like this. And then after that, we're going to talk about the four acts of Robert's life and how all of that including unity and Buddhism, wove itself into various acts. And he'll have to tell me how that happened. Robert, tell us about this weaving together of your call to unity ministry and then later your call to Buddhist teaching
Uh-huh.
and how you integrate that now.
Yes. Thank you.
And one of the things I want you to also bring in is one time I heard you talking about this, and you were talking about one is the descending path, one is the ascending path. And it's
Uh-huh.
like the Kundalini. Uh, they're ascending and descending
Yeah.
simultaneously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. I I was ordained in 1980, and my first church was in Evansville, Indiana. I was there for about 2.5 years. Then I moved back here to the Kansas City area, and I took a church in Overland Park, Kansas, and I was there for exactly 5 years. At the time I was at Overland Park, I got some strong guidance that it was time for me to take a sabbatical, to step away. I was getting divorced at the time. There were a lot of changes going on in my life in many different levels, relational and psychological and spiritual, et cetera, all of the above. So just as I was making that transition from the ministry into my sabbatical, a friend of mine said, Robert, there's this person teaching classes in Topeka, Kansas that I think you'd be interested in. And he's teaching something that he didn't call it Buddhism, but he called it meditation practice of some sort. So I was curious and I was open at that time, and so I thought I'd give it a try. So I drove out to Topeka, which is about an hour and a half from Kansas City, and I met Shinsen Young, who was my first teacher and my primary teacher for over 5 years. Shinsen was teaching retreats, leading retreats at a large house in Topeka to a group of maybe 20 people or 25 people were there. And when I got there and I sat down in the first row, the first thing I heard Shinsen say was, this practice is intended to be used at all times throughout your life. That was exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for something I could integrate into my life and not make it something that was separate and apart. So in unity, as a unity minister, and I practiced meditation quite a bit then too, but it was always something different. It was like I went away to meditate for 30 minutes or 20 minutes, and then I went back to my life, and I wanted to meditate, and I went back to my life. And I was looking for a way to integrate those two together. And so insight meditation, as it was called, or vipassana is the Sanskrit name for it, that would just hit me right between the eyes when he said that. And so he had me hooked. And I was a student of Shinsen's for, like I say, over 5 years. Attended many retreats after that, many weekend retreats, many 10-day retreats eventually. And from there, I moved into practicing with Jack Kornfield or Joseph Goldstein. Jack is in Spirit Rock on the West Coast, and Joseph is in Barre, Massachusetts, at IMS on the East Coast. Those are the two renowned insight meditation teachers. So I practiced that, and interestingly enough, after about 2 years of sabbatical, I call it, that was my time of wandering in the wilderness. That was my wilderness experience. I took a position on the faculty at Unity Village, teaching pastoral studies. And it turned out that was just perfect for me, and evidently what Unity needed as well. So that was in 1989, the same year that they dedicated the new Silent Unity, what was then the new Silent Unity building. And so what was the old Silent Unity building became the new education building. And so I turned out to be teaching there on the faculty for 27 years, which I never intended to stay there that long, but who knows. But I loved it, and it worked. But while I was teaching at Unity Village, let's see, where was that now? I'm trying to think. I know what it was. It was kind of interesting the way these things work out. Karen Shoemaker, the office manager, called me. She says, Robert, I need you to teach an elective, CEP elective. That was a continuing education program elective. And she says, what do you want to teach? And I said, well, I'll get back to you. She says, I need to know right away. And so I just said, well, insight meditation. I picked something that I knew would not need a lot of prep time for me. So I said insight meditation. And so I started teaching that in the continuing education program. And then some of the ministerial students were asking if I would teach it in the ministerial program. So it became an elective in the ministerial program. I was teaching at both CEP and then the MEP ministerial program. And then one of the ministerial students says, Robert, would you consider teaching a class, an ongoing class, Sangha, as it were, at Unity Village Chapel? I said, well, if you contact, Chris Chenoweth was the minister there at that time. And I said, if you contact Chris and talk to him and get his approval, I'd be glad to do it. And the students got back to me and said, Chris was more than happy to have you do it. And so I talked to him and we set things up. And so I started teaching on originally Monday nights at Unity Village Chapel. And I did that for, that was starting in 96. So I did that for 20 years, 22 years actually, I was there. And then shortly after that, one of my students said, would you be interested in leading weekend retreats? And I said, okay. And the perfect place was the Unity Clubhouse, right where the pool is, or was. The pool clubhouse, we called it. And it was a nice little stone house in the woods, right at the edge of the woods. And there was woods on one side and there was a swimming pool on the other side. And just perfect setting. It was a place where relatively few people went to. So we had a nice, quiet surroundings. I did that 4 times a year for almost 20 years, a long time. So the whole time I'm doing this, I didn't ask for permission because I didn't feel like I needed to. I just did it. I mean, Chris Chenoweth endorsed the Monday night retreats, Monday night Sangha, and I talked to whoever the dean was at that time, and they had no problem with me doing the retreats as long as I showed up for classes and stuff. So there at Unity Village, I was by day I was a pastoral care teacher. By night I was a meditation teacher, and it seemed to work very well. And then in my classes, I began to integrate some of Ken Wilber's stuff, his material, and I taught a class on integral spirituality. I taught a class on evolutionary spirituality. I started teaching spiritual direction and a lot of what might be called spiritual formation classes, classes around spiritual development, meditation, one's journey, looking at what one believes and how you came to believe that, and so forth. So that's kind of how that happened vis-a-vis my teaching at Unity Village and so forth. So I'll stop at this point.
You know, you're bringing up the names of so many people that I've known and loved. Chris Chenoweth.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
It's just beautiful and so incredible how our paths are touched by the same people. Jack
Hmm.
Field was my first really deep meditation teacher before Spirit Walk was even built. It was a dream that he held in his awareness. And Spirit Rock had not come into physical
Hmm.
form.
Interesting. Wow.
Really fascinating. And
Wow.
and I was in a retreat with him near Thousand Palms, California, which I ended up spending some years of my life there.
Okay.
You know, did you know Tara Branch,
Yeah,
B-R-A-C,
Tara Brock.
Tara Brock?
Yeah, I did not attend many of her retreats. I knew I received certification at Spirit Rock around the year 2000 as a Dharma teacher, and Tara was on the East Coast, and the gentleman that worked with her went through the same program that I went through. We went through something called the Community Dharma Leaders Program, which was kind of the equivalent of the licensed teacher would be in Unity Village. So the Dharma teachers at Spirit Rock were like the ministers, and we were out in the field. We were like the licensed teachers. So we were trained to lead groups locally and to lead retreats and teach meditation classes and so forth.
And of course, now Victor told me about one of the first things that you did was to recommend that he go through the Spirit Rock program.
I sure did, and that hasn't worked out yet. But I've been after him to go to one of those a longer retreat or get some training, get some certification. Yeah, I think it would be good. But again, that's just my opinion. So
Well, it's so amazing how you have moved through so many different roles in your life,
yeah,
from being casually interested to being seriously interested to becoming certified, becoming a teacher of, and now you are becoming a mentor and a way shower. And I think that's perhaps the role of many of us who have lived into our later years and realize that we've come a long way.
yeah,
And the things that we've learned over the many acts of our lives will be lost unless we make an effort to invite others to
yeah.
follow.
I agree.
So, let's talk about how unity and Buddhism are ascending and descending paths. Which is the ascending path?
Well, I think of in terms of the Aquinas's categories, I think it was Aquinas that developed the idea of the via positiva, the via negativa.
Yes.
And the via positiva might be called the ascending. In via positiva, it's finding God by cultivating the qualities of the divine.
Yes.
So
And
one
that's very
one
similar to what
seeks to strive to be like the divine.
Matthew Fox teaches now.
Exactly. And the via negativa, or the descending path, is finding God by letting go of everything. And so in Christianity, why John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila are beautiful examples of that. And of course, Buddhism is classic via negativa, and unity is classic via positiva. So in unity, when we meditate upon the divine ideas. So we cultivate divine love, we cultivate divine faith, we cultivate divine strength, and so on and so forth. So we cultivate the qualities of the divine by meditating, studying, and practicing. In Buddhism, in the via negativa, we don't do anything. I won't say we don't do anything, but the primary work is on letting go. It's not acquiring, but it's on letting go of who we think we are, letting go of anything we think God is. We let go of letting go. I mean, just total. And so I love the quote, the story from, I think it was Alan Watts tells a story about when he was in Japan in a Zen temple. He asked the Zen master there, he said, what do you think is the difference between your practice in Zen and our practice as Christian contemplatives? And the Zen master said, well, as I understand it, you folks peel potatoes in the presence of the divine. And Watts said, yeah, that's it. And the Zen master said, well, we just peel potatoes. So it's the simple being without any accoutrements of ideas, names, and so on and so forth. So that's the letting go of everything. And I think it was Meister Eckhart talked about falling into God. And he even said, I prayed to God to rid me of God, which is an interesting statement. In other words, I prayed that I let go even of any concept of God so that I can be fully open, fully divine. Because any ideas I hold of something is not the reality of what it really is, you see. And so that's the via negativa, and that's the essence of Buddhism, as I see it. And unity, as I say, is more ascending, creative. And they also kind of reflect, I think, the basic difference between the Eastern perspective on life and the Western perspective. In Western spirituality, the focus is more on the world, relationships in the world, making changes in social structures, making changes in the world. And Charles Fillmore's goal was basically to spiritualize materiality, spiritualize the material world. And so he was very interested in the outside world. He was very much of a scientist, and he was very interested in prosperity and things like healing and things where we become masters of the external world. Whereas the Eastern approach is more of one of seeing the world as Maya, that the world is really an illusion to be seen through. The world is a veil. And the work is to rend that veil and to see reality beyond it. So there's two different approaches to awakening. One is by going up and out. The other is by going down and in. And ironically, we arrive at the same place. We may have different language, we may have different memories, we may have a different route that we take, but we come together just like the right hand and the left hand. Maybe way, it may look this far apart, but it's really part of the same thing. So that's kind of the way I tend to explain it.
All right, let's shift and talk about the four ashrams or the four stages of your life. I was delighted when I Googled the four ashrams and a site came up that said they're traditionally linked to the yogas and certain years of your life. And
Right.
now, more often, or now what's happening is that they're dividing them into 25-year slices. And I thought I was making up 25 years. I thought I'd never heard that before. I was delighted to hear that somebody had said it before me. So we'll talk about briefly 5 minutes maybe on the first ashram or the first stage of your life, then the second stage and third stage, and you're now in your fourth act, just like I am.
Yeah. So
So we'll start with the first.
I was born in Toledo, Ohio, and I was raised Catholic. My mother and her side of the family were all Catholic. They were French Canadians. My father did not attend church. He was not religious at all initially. And his side of the family is German. And yeah. So the Brumets have been around for a long time. One of my ancestors was at Valley Forge with George Washington, whereas the other side of the family came primarily from Quebec and into Detroit and northern Michigan. So I was raised, I went to Catholic grade school. I was taught by nuns and got well indoctrinated. I was an altar boy and all that sort of stuff. And yet my father's side of the German side, the Brumet side, they tended to be more evangelical Christians. And so I used to have to go to listen on weekends. I would go listen to how I could get saved by the blood of Jesus. And then during the week, I would go to the Catholic school and go to Mass. And somehow I survived that without going bonkers. I'm not sure. I think as a kid, you just do what you have to do. But then gradually, when he was in his mid-30s, my dad got converted. And when he got converted, he went gung-ho evangelical religion. I mean, he was all in 100%. And fortunately, I was a teenager at this time, and I was relatively unaffected by that. But my younger brother, uh, he had some trouble deciding who he was spiritually. But fortunately, I did not get involved too much with the indoctrination of the evangelicals, but clearly was in the Catholic side. I did go to a public high school, and then when I went to University of Toledo, even though I originally was in the field of engineering, I was attracted to several books on philosophy, and I took a course in philosophy. And when I did, it just opened up a whole new world to me. I didn't know. I read Bertrand Russell, for example, who's a humanist and very anti-religious. And he just tore apart organized religion. And I didn't know you could do that. I mean, I've never, I was never, it never even crossed my mind that I could question my religion. That's how deep the indoctrination was. So it was, when I first read that, I tell people it was better than pornography. If I had to choose between pornography and this, and I was 20 years old at the time too, but I would pick I would pick the philosophy. It was much more meaningful, and it was so it put me on a quest. And of course, the first part of the quest was to challenge everything the Catholic Church taught, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I threw it all out, lock, stock, and barrel. And eventually, I began to feel a need for some kind of spirituality, but I sure didn't want to go back to the Catholic Church. So I found a Unitarian church in Toledo, Ohio. And the Unitarians, I kind of say jokingly, are basically agnostics that still want to go to church. And so, because that's what I was. I was an agnostic, and I felt the need to go to church for some reason. I really have a deep appreciation for the Unitarians, but I missed the heart part of it. I missed the spiritual element of it. They were more focused on social justice and things in the world. So I had some psychic experiences. This is a long story, and I don't want to go into all the details of it. It would take way too long. But we had a poltergeist infestation in our house. And poltergeist is a German word for noisy ghost. And things happened that my engineer brain said could not happen. So that was my introduction to the fact that there was more to this life than my philosophy dreamt, as Shakespeare would say. And so I went through a real internal crisis. I mean, here I am in graduate school studying the laws of physics, and back home all sorts of weird things are happening and that are total violation of the laws of physics, And so that opened me up to a lot of studies and curiosity, and I became very much involved in the psychic phenomena. I read a lot about reincarnation, about spiritualism, life after death. I got involved in an Edgar Cayce group, got very interested in Edgar Cayce. And eventually I found a Unity Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So that's really gets in then into the second phase of the second ashram of my life. I did graduate as an engineer and a computer programmer. I started out computer programming and so, got into what is now called IT. Back then it was electronic data processing, we called it. So, so that's my first chapter.
And when did you meet the woman you eventually married and with whom you had children?
I met her I first met her in high school. We started dating after we were out of high school. We dated for about 2 years and got married and started having kids right away. So, yeah, so we've got 4 beautiful children. They're not children anymore. They're they've got kids of their own. So, and most of them are grandparents themselves. So I've got great grandkids too.
So
So
how many years were you married?
I was married 25 years. So I got married at age 21 and got divorced at age 46, 47.
So your householder years were when you were married, having children, and what happened to the marriage?
Um, Gail and I just went 2 very different directions. I noticed that when I went into ministry, I was in my late 30s when I went into ministry, and at that time, Gail was very much supportive. The kids were very supportive, but the further I got on my journey, it was evident that she did not want to be part of that, and that it took another 5 or 6 years, but I could feel us going separate ways. And right now, I mean, Gail and I are still very friendly, but she got a very different life than I do. So so it's clear that we had to part. And fortunately, we got our kids raised by the time we did that. And it was not an easy separation, but at least there were no young children involved.
So that was a blessing.
That was a blessing, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, so the divorce came. That was kind of in my. That's really what began the fourth or the third. I'm sorry, the third.
The third act.
It's the third act. Yeah, probably the third act was from age 45, roughly 40, 45, through age 75, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so about 30 years of the third act, the forest dweller, as they call it in the traditional Eastern language. You want me to get into that?
Sure. Go ahead.
That began primarily toward the end of my tenure at Overland Park Unity Church. This was in the late 1980s. This is about the time that I discovered insight meditation, as I shared earlier. This was a time when I left the Overland Park Church and subsequently began teaching at Unity Village. So that was kind of the beginning of my forest dweller. So I got involved in Buddhist meditation. I got very involved in the men's movement. At that time was very helpful for me, very healing, because I had, like so many in my generation, I did not know how to relate to men as friends, as people. Men were, you drank beer with them, you went to football games, and you worked on cars together, and you went fishing and hunting and so forth. But to really have friends, close, deep friendships with men, I didn't know how to do that. Of course, I never had that experience with my father. My father was always very aloof, very, very emotionally unavailable. So I had a lot of woundedness in that area, and the men's movement helped me enormously. And I learned how to relate to men and to develop friendships and supportive, meaningful relationships. And I learned too what male spirituality is versus female spirituality, you know.
Define the difference there.
Well, the difference, I think, primarily is feminine spirituality is primarily around relationships. It's relational in its orientation, it's more feeling in its orientation. Male spirituality is more around agency, it's more around being creative, recognizing how men have been both perpetrators and victims of the patriarchal culture, and that there's a big difference between patriarchy and masculinity. They are not the same thing. They're very, very different things. So I learned to be what it means to be male, masculine, and spiritual, apart from the patriarchal system, which is all I knew before. And so before was either patriarchy or the feminist approach. And the masculine spirituality acknowledges the feminist approach, but it's not the same. It's very different. So, and I also was involved, got very much involved in Native American spirituality at that time. That was also very healing to really connect with the earth and with the natural world. And I did a great many sweat lodges and medicine wheels and vision quests and things like that were very helpful for me. All of this was in the late 80s and the early 1990s. And that was, so between men's work and the Native American work and Buddhist, and then finding Unity Village. I also asked at that time landmark education and asked, so it was a difficult time, but a very rich time for me. There were lots that I learned, a lot of new beginnings. There was a lot happening at that time.
You're reflecting so much of my own life. It's like, oh my God, oh my God.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought about Vern Barnett, the
Yeah.
Unitarian.
Yes.
One of the people that co-founded Temple Buddhist Center.
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
incredible. Jack Cornfield.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, Vern. Vern is an old friend of mine and former Unitarian minister.
Uh-huh.
And he set off to do his own thing. He's been doing that for many years. So, yeah.
And I thought about Jack Groverland, whose son was just a CEO at Unity Village, and not at Unity Worldwide now.
Exactly.
But Jack Groverland's connection to Edgar Casey, how deep that was, and
Yes.
life-changing it was for him.
Yes. Yes.
So, and I thought about my own relationship to the women's movement, but it was more than that for me. I didn't like the way women tended to reject men, and I wanted something that went beyond that. And I found that at in unity, that where Charles Fillmore talked about the divine masculine and the divine feminine,
Yeah.
and first within, but then in the world.
Yes.
And if you find someone in the world that understands both and, then you have a true holy union.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it's quite amazing. So chapter 6 in my book is about that mystical marriage, the marriage within your own being,
Yes.
and how relationships actually come for a time and sometimes go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I've noticed that relationships, I've had relationships that, in fact, all of my relationships, in retrospect, I can see where I've learned something in each, and I needed that relationship.
Yeah.
And at times I needed to separate too. That was part of what I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I learned that not all relationships are forever. And that was part of my old conditioning, my old Catholic conditioning, and that was challenging to me. Breaking free from the Catholic Church, breaking free from my marriage, because I was so deeply conditioned that once you made a commitment, you don't ever change it, ever, under any circumstance. And it's obviously not true, but that was what I was. So I struggled with that a lot.
And in my life, I was conditioned by the Seventh Day Adventist Church, very fundamentalist, very
Woo! Yeah,
literal.
yeah,
And until death do us part was taken very literally.
yeah, yeah,
When I finally got divorced after my first marriage, I was shunned by Adventists. Shunned.
and that's just the opposite of what you need when you're going through a divorce. You
Exactly.
need support. Yeah, yeah.
So let's go to your fourth act. That would be 75 and beyond.
Well, the fourth act was pretty clear. It began in April of 2015, and that was when Charlotte Shelton and the Donna Donna Dearmore. She was the head of the UMS or the AUC or whatever it was called at that time. It was so she was the head of the ministerial field program, and then of course Charlotte was in charge of the Unity School side of things. So they called us together in a meeting and informed us that the school basically was being dissolved as it was, and it was being turned into an all online program. And so basically we were all out of work. That same week, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So that was hell week for me, and I went through a whole lot with the medical community. I was given a mixture of drugs that quite literally drove me crazy and made me very ill. Ultimately, what happened was I did recover from the psychosis that I was in once my brain got cleared out. but it also affected my intestines so that I had to have 3 different surgeries on my the same place. 3 surgeries in a period of 3 weeks from stress, from not eating, not sleeping, and then from the drugs that they had put me on. So I learned at that time that I really had to take charge of my own health and my own life. And that doesn't mean that all medications are not necessary. I mean, I take medications now because they are necessary. But I couldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't take certain medications. But then there's other ones that I don't need. So I'm went through a lot of discernment around medicine, holistic medicine, healing, what healing means, what it looks like. So yeah, it was a very, very difficult, very complex period of my life. But I came out of it, of course, as you can see, and I came through that experience, Marge, with a sense of getting in touch of a part of myself that I knew was invulnerable. And as I was going through these life-threatening events and all of the surgeries that I had and all of the hospitalizations that I had, there was a part of me just watching the whole thing. And that part of me that was watching the whole thing, I knew would never die, could never be hurt. And so it taught me, I'm not even sure how to put it into words, but it taught me that whenever I must endure, I can. And as Nietzsche says, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Yeah. And so I can't say I'm grateful for the experience, but I will say that it sure has made me stronger. There's no doubt about that. And so, interestingly enough, almost immediately after leaving the school at Unity Village, I started getting phone calls, people wanting counseling. And the one thing I did do that I haven't mentioned is I got certified as a spiritual director in 2012 through the Benedictine monastery. And I fell in love with the Benedictine sisters. They're just a deep, beautiful spirituality. So I have a lot of respect for them. So I've got unity, Buddhism, and also Benedictine Christianity are really foundational for me. So anyway, over the years, the number of people I work with has grown considerably. And so I'm working with almost 30 people now on a spiritual director basis, meeting with them once or twice a month. Then at that same period, I continued my teaching at Unity Village Monday Night Sangha, the meditation group. And then there were a couple of friends of mine that were running a group at Unity Temple on the Plaza. And they got tired of doing it, and they asked me if I would take over their Sangha. So it seemed to be perfect timing because I was ready to let go of my connection with Unity Village and pick up the energy at the Unity Temple. So I started leading meditation evening groups there. And then around, I don't remember when it was, right around that same time, Nian Vong, Reverend
Yeah.
Nian Vong, she started a Sunday afternoon service. She asked me if I would speak at that service periodically. Once a month, I think it was, I spoke there. And that's where I met Victor, her husband, who was a musician. Yeah, he played music. And so he helped set up, and I was there, and we got to know each other. And then Nian left. Nian left the Unity Temple, and then Nian and Victor got divorced, and somebody's at the door, but I'll let that go. They got divorced, and right about that same time, Duke asked Victor if he would take on Temple Buddhist Center. I'm sure Victor told you all about it. And I remember one time, Victor called me and said, Robert, could we have lunch together? So we met at a place called the Westport Flea Market and had a burger and a beer, sat down and chatted. And basically he says, I need some help. He says, I got grabbed by this train, and I'm on this train going 100 miles an hour, and I don't know what to do with it. So he was just kind of getting on his feet with the whole bit, of leading a meditation group, a large meditation group. So the very first meeting we had, I think there were probably 50, 75 people there. And it's been growing ever since. And he's done a marvelous job of growing that ministry. And right now, I think between the in-person, we have like probably 150 people every Sunday there. And then we have probably another 75 to 100 online. So there's over 200 people, and that's big for Buddhist Sangha, very big. And so that's been a very rich part of my life to be part of that. He and I take turns speaking on Sundays. I speak the first and the third Sunday typically, and then he speaks on the second and the fourth, and then other times. But so yeah, it's growing and it's exciting, and he's in the process of learning how to run a big organization, and so my help not only with the Buddhist side of it, but also the organizational side of it. Being a minister for 8, 9 years, you learn a lot about how to run an organization and how to say no when what to do and what not to do, kind of a thing. So that's been a great experience. Victor and I are good friends, and I've enjoyed working with him, and that's been a very rich experience for me. Then we lead retreats twice a year. We have a 5-day retreat in the spring and in the winter time, New Year's retreat. So yeah,
That's beautiful. So beautiful. And I'm glancing at our time and realizing we're approaching that pause point where we stop and shift from the dialogue between you and I with a few announcements in between, and then move into what I call the oh my God moments, where people can ask questions or share the experience that they had in hearing your story. And what I believe is that all of the stories of people's lives are sacred love stories guiding you home. And you find wayshores and you find
Yeah.
fellow travelers along the way.
Yes.
And and so let me take a moment to say that this platform called By Love Institute is 100% supported by love donations. I am a firm advocate and believer in Myrtle Fillmore's concept of a love donation. And so there is no cost for this program as far as a fee. And Yet, we need your assistance and your help in helping us maintain the platform on a love donation base. And so I invite you to scroll down in your emails or go on Called by Love Institute. And I invite you to become a contributor to this platform. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that next month in March, we are going to hopefully go back to some of the call with Janet Law from Vancouver, Washington, who was an assistant to one of my mentors, Marvin Anderson, who I'm feeling more and more is getting lost into the invisible in the Unity movement. I couldn't even find a picture of him online about himself, not even in Unity archives or truth.net. And he was one of my great mentors of shift into the awakened world. And so I'm hoping that Jim Vollett, who is on the board with Marvin, will join us on the call. I haven't gotten a yes yet from Jim. He may or may not. If anything happens on that call, I intend to talk about Marvin Anderson anyway. And we'll invite people to join me in understanding Marvin the way I understood him. And he died in his 60s, and another example of great souls who have passed through the veils. And yet I mention him three times in my book, and especially in chapter 3. A lot of it is about Marvin Anderson and his impact in my life. So that's the call next month in March. In April, it's my birthday month, and Tony Baim is going to interview me.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
And she's written many, many books about evolution of consciousness and trained many ministers. And so uh, and Robert, keep this in mind. Someone wants to know how to access your site. So when we come back to you, be sure and give us that information. And then also in April, Tony will be interviewing me. And in May, I will be interviewing Brad Laughlin, who was co-partner with Leslie Temple Thurston, one of the great mystical teachers of our time. And Brad has become her successor and is doing a fabulous job with their platform, Core Light. So exciting times ahead for the next 3 months. And the other thing that I want to uh, let you know is that we really do want to hear from you. You can send me personal messages. You can send me what your wishes and desires are for the future of Called by Love. And I may call you back and say, let's have a conversation. So Ross is on the board of Called by Love Institute now and is very much a part of humanity's team and actually feels in many ways like the sun that I still have.
You still
So
have.
it's wonderful to have you here. And you probably have some more thoughts that we'll share maybe in future calls. So we'll talk about that, Ross. Anything you want to say now?
Well, I guess Garth has unmuted me. So Robert, I was just so fascinated to hear your story, and it's a real privilege to meet you in this format.
Thank you.
We have a lot of things in common, including the fact that my ancestors have been in America since 1712.
Wow.
Wilbur's lawyer and integral. Jeff Salzman and I started the Integral Center
Oh, great.
in Boulder, Colorado. I've done ist. Lots of meditation. I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
And the context of the question is this: everybody kind of is realizing we're kind of in a period of whitewater here,
Yeah.
in the States and in America that
Yeah.
is, in my now 70 plus years has really not been seen in quite the same way. And I guess my question is, with all that you've done, all that you know, if you were speaking to America about the way and what we should do, in these times to improve ourselves and become vessels and to become folks that can bring goodness, truth, and beauty in the world. What would you say? And
Mm.
I'll also just say that I've spent a lot of time around meditation, a lot of time around Buddhism. Roger Walsh in our last integral conference just did a blistering critique of of kind of where it was. It just says meditation is used as escapism now. It's being used like a drug.
Yeah.
Meditation, you can't see the psychic shadow from the meditative state, so that's why
Yeah.
we have all these meditation teachers that are doing all this improper sexual and financial stuff and everything like that. We can't see evolution. There's people that say, I've been in Turiya, gross, subtle, causal, Turiya Tita. I've been in Turiya. I'm fully awake within the dream. And okay. Is it, so, you're a wisdom keeper along with Marj and many people on this call. So is, what would you say about the way? And what would you recommend?
Well, I feel a lot of sadness when I think about it. Uh, I would say remember who you are, not only as us as individuals, but as a country. Jacob Needleman wrote a book called The Soul of America, which I found to be a very powerful book. And it's about looking at the fact that our Constitution is really based on spiritual principles. It's based upon the wisdom and the love of each individual that's part of this country. And it's being lost. It's being lost. It's being forgotten. Not by everybody, but by many. I can remember my earliest memories was during World War II, just at the very end of World War II, and I had a uncle that died during the war, and I knew many neighbors that had relatives and husbands that were in that war, and it's like that. It hurts me when I see the soldiers, like during the D-Day invasion, and what they've given. And, to have a leader that calls them suckers and losers, it is just really the most sacrilegious in is the epitome of darkness as far as I'm concerned. So we're in a very dark time. And I think it's important for us to find our truth and to speak that truth and to do it no matter what. I've I don't know if you're familiar with who Eric Bonhoeffer
Hmm.
is or was. Yeah. So I've read his story and was very moved by it. And I don't know if it's going to come to that, but I think that we're being called to show up in a way that is tantamount to what World War II was, only it's in a very different. The threat is not from somewhere else. The threat is existential. It's right within us. So I think there's been a lot of decay over the years in who we are and what we are. I think the founding fathers wanted to separate religion and government, but they did not want to abolish religion. And I think what's happened is that because of that separation of church and state, and because of the fact that people don't attend church much anymore, that there's this huge vacuum, there's a huge hole in the soul of America, that we have no spiritual foundation. We have no cultural myth that's based on spirituality. And so that's what we need. And I think that cultural myth, when I say myth, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
And to get in touch, each of us, to get in touch with what is the soul of this country. And it was very noble and very powerful. I think the founding fathers were very wise, but we've entered into a territory that they could not even consider, they could not even imagine. Um, I think America has a lot of karma, and maybe that's what's happening now too, the karma to the Native Americans, karma to the Black Americans, African Americans, and to a lot of other minority groups. So I think it's a time of cleansing. It may be the end of our country. I don't think it is. I don't think it will be. But it certainly is challenging. It's a dark time. And I'm hoping, like, we've experienced in our own life, the darkest times and the most difficult times have given us the greatest strength and resilience. And I hope that's the case with our country. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to live to see it. I hope you do,
Hmm.
but we'll see.
Yeah. So just one follow-up question,
Yeah,
on the everyone here in the call, and I know including Marge and the two of you are, way showers in what you might call American spirituality. And we've had this huge confluence of Eastern and Western. Everything is here. All
yeah,
kinds of practices are here.
yeah,
It's all available. It's all, it's been a remarkable, great confluence of everything that's here in America.
yeah.
And the hope is, at least um, the the hope and the integral movement and all that, is that this confluence is going to cohere into a way. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And um, tell me about that. Is there a response that we can do both on an individual and collective level to heal the soul of this place?
I think it's important to recognize that the leadership in our country now, if you want to call it that, the leadership in our country right now is really a symptom and not the primary cause. So it's not that they're blameless, and it's not that I necessarily like them, but I think there's much more than just getting rid of, bad leaders, replacing them with good leaders. There's much more to it than that, and that I think they're kind of like a boil in the body. When we get a boil, it's indicative of there's some poison in the body that needs to be extracted. And I think that's what's happening is the shadow side of America is really showing up big time. So it's important, I think, to integrate if we can, so that we're not fighting evil, but we're using this opportunity to go deeper into the foundation of who we are. And I think there are so many groups, so many people doing wonderful, powerful, grateful things. And I think what happens too is that our government has not kept pace with the culture. Our culture is growing faster than the government is, and the individuals are growing faster than the culture is. I think there's a lot of personal growth and transformation, but the institutions have not been able to support that, contain that. And it's like a relationship, it's like any situation where the container that once helped us and held us needs to be released. And so I'm not sure what that looks like, but it's very clear that our government, even before Trump and company came to power, even before our government was not reflective of our deepest values and not reflective of the will of the people, and certainly not reflective of the best of us. So, yeah, I would agree that I think these things will come together, and I think they'll come together quite organically. The political movement and the spiritual movement, although they're two separate things, I think we'll begin to find more common ground. And I think that, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think we'll come up with some responses that we can't even imagine right now. But I think they'll occur. Because when I talk to people, I don't hear so much, ain't it awful, let's rebel, let's pick up pitchforks or rifles and go after them. But it's more people recognizing that love and getting in touch with the deeper reality is really the answer.
Well, thank you. I don't want to take any more time.
Okay. I enjoyed talking. I love your questions.
7 hours on this topic. So next time I'm in Kansas City, we're going to get together and I will buy you a beer and a burger.
I would love that. Yes, I would love that. I'll show you I'll take you to the Westport Flea Market.
Sounds good. All right,
Thank you.
And Robert, I want you to answer a question from Patty.
Okay.
Can we access your Sunday night meditations and your retreat schedule?
Yes. 2 different places. My website is robertbrumet.com. And the other place I would encourage you to go would be to the Temple Buddhist Center, tbc.org, I think it is. Temple Buddhist Center. So those two places. And Thursday nights, if I'll give you my email address too. It's rjbrummett@earthlink.net. rjbrummett@earthlink.net. So feel free to email me. If you want to attend the Thursday night Sangha, would love to have you. Would just send me your name and a request, and I'll get you on the email list. And so you could join us every Thursday night if you wish. And then I'll also make sure that you get on TBC, Temple Buddhist Center's website. So,
And I will also mention that I watch Robert online on Sunday mornings by going to that website, and they record the calls. And there are also some on Unity's site for the Unity services. This is something I've not seen in any other Unity church anywhere, where
right.
two services run simultaneously at the same time. One more traditional normative Unity service, and the other the American Buddhism service that Robert's part of. So I love sitting in my love seat at home and watching it online
Yeah.
on some of these freezing cold days.
Yes, yes. So feel free to email me and tell me what you are interested in, and I'll respond. I'll give you my information. I'll give you the TBC information as well. Robert Brumet, or no, RJ Brumet at earthlink.net.
And Cecilia has had her hand up, and
Yes.
we'll take time for Cecilia's call before we close. If you want to bring her on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can. Hi.
Okay, hi. Oh my goodness, Robert, thank you so much. So many parallels. And I'm in a situation now where I am raising two of my granddaughters who are young adults, 21 and 19, and the challenges of Gen Z. And for me, I rely not only on my Catholic upbringing, my 12-step program, my Yaqui elders, that's my background, I'm Native American, and unity. I mean, there's so much, and it's just this huge conglomeration of love and goodwill and teachings that I've been able to absorb in my life. And I have hope. I have hope for us. We're going to be okay. But I wrote in the chat, take good care, hold on to your loved ones. Just really love the people you love. Trust God, trust the process, trust that we're going to move through this. Y luego, gracias. And I hope.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So
Thank you.
life.
Thank you. I agree totally.
Yeah.
So, Robert, we are right at our closing time. And would you like to lead us in a closing blessing and closing
I sure would.
prayer?
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I feel gratitude. I feel gratitude for you, Marj, and for all of you that are part of this call. I feel gratitude because this is what we need. We need to come together. We need to share our commonalities. We need to share our differences, but we need to do it all in love. So I call upon the spirit of love that unites us all, the spirit of love that unites us all, the spirit of wisdom that helps us discern what is ours to do, when to do it. I call upon the power of the Holy Spirit as it moves through human history I call upon the Spirit of the divine to heal us, starting with each one of us, starting within the heart of every one of us, at every level of meditating, acting, studying, learning. Teach us, heal us, empower us to do thy will. And I'll close with that Charles Fillmore invocation that you mentioned earlier, Marj. We are in the presence of pure being, immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. We acknowledge thy presence, thy power, O blessed Spirit. In thy infinite wisdom, heal us from our limitations, from our delusions, from the pure substance of love. Bring forth our new world, our new USA, our new life, according to thy perfect law. And so it is. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you so much, everyone, for being present for this magnificent call that was really spirit directed.
Yeah,
I'm so grateful for these moments that we can share together.
yeah.
And so it is.
Thank you. I can feel the energy.
Yes, so can I.
Yeah.
Much love.
Something I do at the end of my Thursday night sangha, I say, love yourself, give yourself a hug, then give everybody else a hug too. That's one thing. Thank you so much.
And we'll see you next month.
I look forward to it. Bye-bye.